So in this video, I want to tell you about my experiences working with girl bosses at a particular company, and I won't name the company. I think the title of this video, I mentioned that I worked at Morgan Stanley. I'm ex-Morgan Stanley, but of course, this definitely didn't happen at Morgan Stanley. It's just two separate things that happen to be mentioned at the same time. I used to work at Morgan Stanley, and this is a story about girl bosses and my interaction with them throughout my time in the finance industry. If you know my background, I've worked at many top investment banks, so I won't name which particular one this story is from. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that, of course, all the content I provide is for entertainment purposes, right? It's just purely entertainment. It's for, nothing should be taken as factual legal advice. It's just entertainment purposes. So it's speculated, it's alleged, right? So you can read into that however you want, but I've covered myself legally now. So in this video, we're going to talk about my experiences in the finance industry dealing with a lot of these girl boss types. And I just want to caveat that I've worked with many competent women in the workplace too, right? Early on in my career, particularly, tend to be quite good people, but I want to cover some horror stories of what I've worked with. And what I'm covering is a story that happened during my career that lasted several years, and it was getting sick of a lot of the office drama and looking out for a way for myself through career moves later on after this event, and just being concerned of how I was being stuck while other people were being promoted or people who were less competent were put in positions of power above me, right? If you're interested in personalized help so I can help you to deal with these type of scenarios and help you escape some of this toxic like corporate traps, help you grow your pay and take back your career freedom, there is a link in description to speak with me directly for direct career coaching. And this is built on my 10 years experience in the industry. So feel free to click that and we can get started helping you in your career. Now, I'm going to go through certain individuals that I worked with during this scenario. The first would be Vanessa. Now, Vanessa was the head of the team. We were working on the trading floor at the time in financial risk management type of roles, managing $1 billion worth of risk for the trading floor. And this is kind of a common story whereby she had a fast track career and she didn't understand a lot of the other real life dynamics for other people because she'd been kind of treated like a special snowflake as a privileged AWFL, affluent white female liberal, throughout her career. She had a fast track career, which I've seen many times for the white woman in the workplace, where they go from intern to being manager's favorite, and the managers promote them quite quickly because they have these gender equality type of dynamics that would benefit them and hiring and promotion quotas. So she went from like intern to a managing director extremely fast. Just over a decade is how long it took her. She was one of the youngest managing directors who were female at that level, and I'm sure everyone would have looked at that with some suspicion, because I've noticed that other companies is a very common theme across many banks and many other corporations, right? She was given the star student special treatment, and I worked with her on multiple occasions, but she was like my management kind of hierarchy, 1 or 2 levels up depending on how you look at it. And I was like, what is the special, I remember thinking all the time, what is the special skill she had that helped her succeed, if we're going to use that word, to higher levels quite quickly, right? Is she super talented on knowing how financial markets work? Is she a super nice, friendly person? A little bit of that maybe. But there wasn't anything that would really stand out about this person's personality. They'll stand on mediocre, mid-wit, middle management, right? And then this is quite typical at other banks, and she was in a management position, but what was quite interesting about her personality, she couldn't deal with conflict or confrontation. So anytime there was any kind of difficult discussion between 2 team members that she should have to deal with, she would delegate that to middle management just below her to go and deal with that. Even if her and I had a small disagreement, she clearly didn't have the confrontation skills to deal with conflict and always avoided it. And it made dealing with issues like real work issues quite difficult because she couldn't deal with confrontation and disagreement. And there's something I noticed, she would hide behind it, even though she's a middle-aged woman at this point. She would always hide behind someone else, or she couldn't deal with that conflict. And this is one of the issues of putting women in leadership, whereby can they deal with that conflict and confrontation, right? And I think if you're a man in leadership, typically the men who do well in leadership, they have some skills that would align them with a military leader, right? A general, something like that, or a lieutenant, however you want to look at it. But when you put women in these positions and they're artificially propped up, artificially accelerated to those positions, it can lead to a lot of difficulty in terms of interacting with them and their ability to not fulfill their leadership role, because biologically and throughout history that has not been their role. Now, There were, say, no real signs of genius, given her fast track to promotions, and something I was interested in is that she would always suck up to management one layer above her, and then the management, typically men, one layer above her, and the one layer beneath her were men who were quite competent but couldn't make it to her level because there was a bias favoring her. So they would be her lackeys, they would be her lapdogs who would basically do a lot of the work, and they'd have a lot of the skill and the expertise, and she would lean on them. So she's either leaning on senior management one level above her, or of men, right? They're getting rewarded with bigger bonuses for promoting more women, and then the layer of men who are just beneath her are held down in their career, even though a lot of these guys are family guys who are trying to have more kids and have a good lifestyle for their family, but they can't even make that step up. They're stuck in this kind of middle management role, can't make it to senior management. And her herself, she had lived quite a comfortable life. She was obviously well paid in senior management, high six-figure salary. She'd go on all these trips to Dubai, and we know what it means when women go to trips to Dubai, but you can look into that yourself. Also going on skiing trips and things like that, and she had one of those husbands that would suck up to her. And what was quite funny, she would come into work, and this happened 4 or 5 times, and this is quite common at every company I've worked at, more or less, where a woman would be working in the office and she starts venting about her husband or her boyfriend, right? Everyone's had to sit through that at one point or the other. And most women in the office where they'd be complaining about their husband or their boyfriend, and you have to sit through it or just ignore it, or like, tend to be the nice guy, which I would never do. I just shrug my shoulders and get back to work. But she was always complaining about her husband wanted her to change her last name to his last name, and they've been married for some time, so I don't know how this argument occurred after 5 or 6 years of their marriage. And it was kind of funny to me because every company I've worked at, I've had to listen to a woman vent about that last name thing, right? If they've got married or recently or in the past, they don't want to take their husband's last name. The best they can do is take a double barrel last name, things like that. It's quite funny to see it and have to deal with the repeat issue. And I can't imagine what it's like to be in a relationship with a career woman, because you see this time and time again. I remember other people having issues with this, other guys who would be working in their career and they would have to deal with arguments or competing with their wives for where they are in their career, particularly if they're in the same industry, in the same type of department in their industry, and it can lead to competition and disagreements and things like that. Other thing to note is that I feel like often when I'm going to work to be productive, and I think most men, you want to get your work done to the highest standard, get paid as much as you can and go and live your life, but they would turn the workplace, a lot of these female co-workers or girl boss types, into a social event, right? So for example, we would have a meeting that would be like important meeting on foreign exchange trades, right, which is quite time sensitive. There's lots going on. The market's always quite volatile, particularly if you're trading currencies that are emerging market currencies. And what she would do is she would just start the meeting just chit-chatting about something for like 5-10 minutes when I just want to get that meeting done so I can go back to the trading floor and get on with work. She would be talking about some well-paid trader on the trading floor who had some diamond-studded shoes. At the time, having diamond-studded shoes was a social status symbol. I remember seeing it in certain rap music videos. I don't really care about that. Or she'd be talking about how she just got a haircut and she's questioning about her hair length. And it's like, I don't want to comment on your new haircut, right? I don't care, right? I'm just here to do the work. She had the whole kind of self-absorbed queen bee personality, but she was rewarded with that because she was sucking up to senior management and they thought she was this super nice person. She wasn't that good at her job. She was kind of average, but she just knew how to play office politics quite well. And the entire workplace dynamic is based around pandering to specifically, white feminist liberal, right? And then after that, other demographics might get some fair treatment if that's going to happen. Or the other thing I wanted to say is that how there'd be so many double standards. Like I would avoid a lot of these social events unless I knew it was going to benefit my career. I could go there, spend a brief amount of time there and get back to work or leave early. But then obviously we had certain instances where I couldn't avoid that. There'd be a Christmas brunch, for example, whereby I had to listen to middle-aged white women who, again, artificially propped up in a lot of these management roles, making jokes about Love Island, which is a reality TV show here, and talking about twerking and things like that. And it's just ridiculous. I'm just there to work. So I have to sit at this team meeting, this team brunch, Christmas Eve brunch, where I don't really want to be around you. And I didn't really say that, but I was just trying to say, I'm super busy at work. I didn't want to go to the brunch. They dragged me out to that event. I just wanted to be at my desk doing work. I don't want to be having brunch with people I don't like, and they'd have to have all these jokes about, like, say, twerking, all this type of inappropriate conversation where you're like, I'm working with these people and I couldn't get away with making these type of jokes. So it's basically you have to sit there and listen to them gossip and vent about whatever they want to do, and then you have to get back to work, right? And often you notice when you're dealing with a lot of these personality types, they don't have the technical knowledge, they just have soft skills, and that's what everything's become fake and worthless, right? The money you earn has become fake, the work environment's become fake, is everything surface level. So what they get rewarded for is having good soft skills, good people skills, and that's the thing, is they're not bringing anything technical or meaningful to the table. It's just a charade, and this is what you realize a lot about most industries. A lot of it is just an act. It's a theater act. That's why being well dressed and well spoken and well groomed is so much more important than actually being highly skilled, right, and really good and productive and profitable for the company. Even they'll put that aside for the image of what they think being productive and being professional should be. The next person I had to deal with, who was my direct manager. So Vanessa was my manager's manager, and I had to deal with Megan, who is just a replacement name for someone who's my direct manager. But something was quite funny is within a very short space of time of 2 to 3 years, I dealt with multiple female managers who were flipping back and forth in terms of managing me and other people. So I had Megan, who was managing me for about a year, then Chloe, then Laura and Yasmin, and they kept switching roles because it's so disorganized with the way they were interacting with the management layer above, which was Vanessa, because there's always this girl boss, girl power drama type of nonsense. So let's go through each of these. Now, when I was preparing for this video, I was playing that song by Drake called Mob Ties, and the hook of the song, if you're familiar with it, it really does, the chorus of the song, it does remind me of how I really feel about these people, but you can look that up later if you want. So now Megan had issues with Vanessa, right? And I knew this because a former team member had told me they always had a bit of disagreement. Vanessa was known as a micromanager, and I heard from the team member who quit and moved on that there's going to be a lot of drama there, and I'd already signed a job contract and wanted to sign up to work there, so it was like, it's too late for me to opt out now. Now, there were always issues with Megan. She didn't like working there, and I got the impression over time she was looking to leave, which is what she did in the end, but she was always faking health issues. She had a migraine, she had back pain, she was never in the office often, she'd go weeks out without coming to the office, working from home, having never-ended health issues. Now, I thought this could be genuine, but then when I was interacting with her and the way the health issues would switch from one thing to the other, insomnia, migraines, back pain, and then she'd be normal, then something else bad would happen, she'd get extra time off work, something was going on, right? And I realized she was just mentally checked out from work. And she was fed up of Vanessa and a lot of the workplace drama, right? And I realized other female co-workers were creating drama with her. And I don't know all the background. I'm not saying she's completely innocent. But I realized what she was doing is she was essentially taking work tasks and stretching them out as long as possible, and then she would do other tasks that had nothing to do with work, right? So we'd have one task to review a business transaction and a new business initiative for the trading floor. She would just stretch out something that would take 1 hour to take 1 day, and it's quite funny. And then she'd spend another 3 days doing admin for a family, because her family were international, so she would be getting them American passports and French passports and doing travel insurance, that type of things, anything to stretch out work and pretending to be doing things that were relevant to work. She would just be pretending to work. And she was my direct manager sitting next to me, and I was relatively new to the role. So it was like, how am I meant to deal with this? Am I meant to just pretend to be working, or pretend I don't see my manager who should be guiding me or teaching me new things, just not give a F about the role? Now, what I would be doing, because I was relatively new to the role and I was a bit more naive about office politics, but now I know about this and I teach you about this, right? I would end up doing work super quickly. I would have nothing to do all the day. I would do 1 week's worth of work in 2 or 3 days maximum, and then I'd just be sitting around pretending to look busy. And I was really eager to progress my career. That's why I was doing all this, not even extra work, but doing work swiftly so I could learn new skills and build and quickly get promoted. But you realize that it's kind of a rigged game, and the obvious dynamic was to keep me there at the lower level. So there's no real progression plan, and that got demotivating for me, because I realized you have all these girl bosses who are taking up all these layers of management, not adding much value, but they're just playing the character and the persona that a lot of these investment banks want, right? Or corporations in general, because you'd think they'd be profit driven and they want the hardest working people and they want you to be productive, but a lot of it is just a show and a time wasting thing, right? And as a so-called conspiracy theory out there about why did the system push women into the workplace? Was it to lower the cost of wages? Was it to prevent women from having kids? There's so much weird dynamics you start to pick up on is how work is daycare for adults, because lots of people are working and not actually doing anything productive. You have to ask yourself the question, why is that the case? Why are they allowed to do this? Now, the other thing I want to point out is that after this kind of drama and disagreements she would have with Vanessa, it was kind of clear that Megan, she kept skipping work essentially, right? She was coming up with one excuse after the other how she was ill. Other people were picking up on it. It didn't seem genuine. So she ended up getting a quiet layoff, essentially getting a layoff from Vanessa. And what ended up happening is she had to work a few more months, about 3 months or 6 weeks, something like that, before she was asked to leave essentially, right? So sometimes when you get a layoff package, they just pay you a certain amount and you don't come back to the office, you have gardening leave. But in her case, they wanted her to keep working for about 6 weeks before they told her to leave, just so she can finish up some work tasks. And it's very obvious from the tone, even though it wasn't told to me directly, that's what happened, right? You can read in between the lines a bit, that her tone changed. She got even more disinterested in the work at that point, that she announced she was leaving the company. They're just pushing her out, right? So, and what was quite funny and what shows how happy she was to leave and how fed up she was with dealing with Vanessa and this type of girl boss personality is that she cancelled her own leaving drinks. Now, typically when you're leaving a company, particularly a big corporation, that was whatever it was called, you would have leaving drinks. And she cancelled that completely, right? She just didn't want to put up with it. She said, oh, the weather's good. I'd rather everyone have fun by themselves and do what they want to do. I've just got to head off now. I don't have time for these leaving drinks, which is absolutely hilarious because she cancelled it 30 minutes before they were due to happen. You could just sense how fed up she was dealing with some of these personalities. But what's interesting is, while she seemed a bit more amicable than some of the other people some of the other girl boss types I work with, it was interesting how much bias there is against you as a man at work, right? I wouldn't say too many things about my personal views, but at the time I was doing a bit of MMA, just a few personal training sessions, and she was going off. She had a problem with that because anything that men do, she was saying, oh, it's just aggression. Men can't handle their emotions. They have to engage in aggression type of activity like boxing or Muay Thai or mixed martial arts. Now, it didn't bother me that much, but you have to deal with this as a man in the workplace time and time again, where you deal with, I don't want to use the term microaggressions, but little things that women are allowed to take these never-ending digs against men, and if you reverse it, you can't say the same thing about them. For example, Vanessa made jokes about a male co-worker who was at the same level as her being slightly overweight, even though he didn't look like he was. Or they'd be making jokes about twerking, like I mentioned before, or you can't make a joke about a woman's looks or anything that would be deemed inappropriate or harassment. So it's like these never-ending little digs that you have to sit through that I guess has been normalized with these weak, effeminate liberals, the soy boy, the bugmen, the cucks, whatever you want to call them. But because women get away with this with their husbands, talking down to their husbands, talking trash about their husbands or boyfriends at work, they think every other man is going to put up with that. But for me, many of you, we just don't want to put up with that. And often we come from cultures where, let's just say, are slightly more traditional, and we don't deal with that disrespect in our culture. If you want to deal with it in a weak, effeminate, liberal, feminist culture that you have in the West, you can. But if you're importing many people from other countries, they're not going to put up with it. And you see a lot of this tension playing out in society right now without getting into it. The other thing is, she was Catholic, right? And she had relatively strong religious views sometimes, but she was also woke, and she was telling me randomly how she didn't want her kids to go to church because they were teaching things that are against the rainbow flag community. She wanted her kids to be more tolerant of the rainbow flag community. And it was things like that were just a bit weird. She didn't want her daughters watching Disney movies about princesses because that's not how the world really works. And it was just these weird things where you just listen to these people and you're like, these are brainwashed, woke, liberal, feminist types, where it's like any little bit of thought outside of that, like me mentioning homeschooling as just a general point, would really trigger them, because they were so brainwashed. And also the funny thing is how they have this self-righteous posturing about all these political views, but how they treat their own family. They're so obsessed with their career and social status. She mentioned one time when she's with her husband and they're with their kids in the evening after work, they would feed their kids like breakfast for dinner, having porridge for dinner, or they'll get some baguettes and have some sandwiches for dinner because she was too tired to cook, which is understandable because she's working her corporate job. But you're giving your kids bad nutrition, letting your kids be brainwashed, and then anything that's pro-male, pro-masculine, pro-gender roles, whatever that would be, is bad. In what sense are you doing good things? You're not even being a productive employee, right? So this is the type of ridiculousness you have to deal with some of these girl boss types. Another employee who was friends with Megan was Chloe, right? And she started using the same strategy as Megan, right? She had issues with Vanessa. She was always claiming time off sick. And also around the time she had a few kids, right? She had one pregnancy, which is understandable, have some maternity leave and things like that. But then it became obvious she was using the same strategy as Megan. Oh, I've got a mental health issue. Oh, I'm not feeling well. I'm feeling sick today. She would just come up with all these excuses. And then often I had to do her work and cover for her work. And it became apparent to me that part of the reason that I'd been hired as a man is that I had to cover for Megan's excuses and Chloe's excuses, essentially, because they were either looking after their kids, getting time off to leave work early and drop their kids off at school in the morning, pick up their kids off from school in the afternoon, have all these irregular work schedules, which simply doesn't work in the trading floor because you have very intense, time-sensitive requests. There's a trade, there's a problem with a trading vendor or an exchange. We have to quickly deal with these things. Very stressful, right? You can't be like, oh, this isn't a normal office job where you can log in at home at night and do a bit of work and then log in early in the morning and then skip the 9 a.m. session of work because you want to drop off your kids at school. It doesn't work like that. It just isn't functional. But the reason why they hired me, when I reflect upon it, is like, I've got these two women who are doing their job more, some prioritizing their kids, in some cases just not being very productive, and that's why they hired me. And I realized, cool, well, there's not really a plan for me to progress. You just want me to carry the weight of, and this is a reoccurring theme for so many men out there, which is you're carrying the weight for female middle management who are not doing a good job, and men who are younger than them are held down and pushed down and enforced in a very rigorous way. You can't say this, you can't do that, and you have to work to cover their work hours, right? It becomes ridiculous. It's so common in the finance industry and other industries too. So in this situation, right, she was making mistakes. I was responsible for one thing, which would be many things actually, but one thing is training over 500 members of the sales and trading floor, right? And I had to manually check a lot of data and a lot of mistakes of where she wasn't training people properly, covering the right topics. She wasn't training all the people we should have been training. She didn't follow up to ensure we redid the training with people who didn't attend and things like that. So it was like a really messy way she would organize things, because when I was looking at her notes from the previous year, the Excel files, I was like, this is a complete mess. And I reorganized it and redid it. And then what's funny is after I was planning to leave, a few years later, I handed over the work task of this training 500 employees to another woman, a newer woman who'd been there for a year or so. And she made even more of a mess of it and made more mistakes. And this is just a reoccurring thing. If you're not allowed to comment on it, you're going to be called misogynist. The simps in management, and this is often, we can't blame everything on women, because simps and girl boss types ruin the work environment, right? It's not just women, it's these weak men. They'll never hold these women accountable. They're worried they might get accused of harassment or misogyny or whatever. They let their wives walk all over them, and then they let the woman at work walk all over them. And this is such a common thing, right? So what ended up happening is she was just not doing things properly, and it just became ridiculous because I was covering for a lot of her work and she wasn't in the office half the time. So how can I ask her questions when she's meant to be a slightly more senior than me? And what was interesting is around the time there was another male employee who was working for her too, and he was covering, slightly looking at commodities and different areas of the business. And what ended up happening with him is he was getting fed up because he didn't have her around to give him some guidance, because she was meant to be the more senior employee to give some helpful management training, because that's what managers are meant to do, right? So he left after a year and a half because he saw how the dynamic was. The company had to hire contract workers at very high daily rate to cover for her work too. So it was like, how expensive are some of these girl boss type employees if they're not working, they're calling off sick? In some cases, they're prioritizing their kids over the work, which makes sense, but it's not going to get work done. Male employees have to cover for their mistakes. The males in management are not going to hold them accountable. So it just became ridiculous after a point, right? And also, again, with all the females that I work with, you always have to deal with it. They always have a never-ending vent. They're always venting about men in some way or form. In her case, she was complaining that there was recently a Christmas advert for Peloton, the exercise bike. And she said, oh, this exercise bike, in the advert, a man was buying that bike for a woman, for his wife. And they were saying, this is misogynist. Oh, he's telling his wife to lose weight by telling her to get this bike. And this is the type of ridiculous things. Like, you're just sitting there as a man going to work, and there's like never-ending whinge. I call it the triple W, the white woman whinge of against men, railing against the patriarchy, even though it doesn't even exist. So when it comes to Laura, she switched from another department to my department and my team, and she wanted this management role. Now, what's funny is within a year of joining my team, she switched back to her old role because she got fed up with Vanessa. And this shows you how there can be a lot of drama and disagreement between women, right? In the sense of petty drama, petty jealousy and things like that. And it's not just men complaining with the girl boss archetype, right? Many other women are fed up with it too. So what ended up happening is she joined our team, but she didn't have the expertise in this area of finance. She didn't know what to do. Often I would ask her for guidance or feedback on some of my work. She didn't really know what the finance technical element of it was, because again, she was focused on soft skills. She was in a position of senior management because she was shown preferential treatment, because she was parroting all the right beliefs, the left-wing liberal beliefs, pushing the right political agendas, the right woke agenda. She was sucking up to management, but she didn't have the technical skills needed. So in one case, I asked her for her analysis on one of these trading activities. I was looking at this trading surveillance, and she wasn't sure, so she just says, yes, it's okay. So we went to a meeting, and I was presenting it, and then other management pointed out I made a mistake, and I was like, what am I meant to do here? I'm meant to say my manager didn't point this mistake out before when I sent it to her 3 days ago? Am I saying she's not helping me? So I got blamed in my end of year performance review too, and that really annoyed me because I hadn't done anything wrong. I actually asked for help because I wasn't sure about something. And that obviously impacted my bonus and my ability to succeed in that particular role. And it's a typical situation for women. There's no accountability for them. They just basically get special treatment. And then what was also funny is that Vanessa, because she had this girl boss queen bee syndrome, she always was never comfortable with some of the women beneath her in management. There was always some disagreement. The only people she tended to get along well with, Vanessa, was the management layer of men above her that she would suck up to, and then the management layer of men immediately below her, because they would do all her work and she would just pretend to be fake nice with them. So when it came to more junior female management like Chloe or Laura, there'd always be some kind of drama there, right? So for example, within the span of the same year, Chloe and Laura constantly switched roles as to which was my manager. For a couple months it was Chloe, a couple months it was Laura, then it was Chloe again, and then Laura left the team, so Chloe was my manager, but then Chloe left for another sickness type of issue, so my manager became a male employee who was briefly there for some time before they found another female manager. And this is what I mean about the never-ending drama, shifting roles quite quickly within the space of a year. It was just a bit ridiculous. And I was losing interest because I realized they can't manage their team effectively, and there's a reoccurring issue with Vanessa that no one wants to address because senior management thinks she's so good at her job because she presents herself well. And then I was already ready to leave my job. I was looking for something else. And then one time she flipped out on me, actually, Laura, right? Because I wasn't doing some extra work. But I'd already checked out mentally from the job. I lost respect for her as an authority figure because of all of this drama, because she didn't have the technical skills. And this is why it's so difficult as a man, typically, to deal with female management above you. Is a lot of times they don't have the technical skills. They have the social skills. They just dress well and present themselves like a manager, which is what a lot of these senior male managers want. It's like, oh, we need a female manager who presents herself professionally, and they promote her on that basis, but not on the basis of her skills. So she lacked the knowledge that would be greater than mine, so I can respect someone who has more skill than me. And I just stopped taking work seriously. I was just ready to quiet quit. It was a completely disorganized mess, and this has gone on for multiple years. Now, again, and the funny thing is, she had the similar event that I mentioned from Vanessa, where Vanessa was complaining about her husband wanting her to change her last name. So did Laura, right? And this is the type of common thing you see with these girl boss types. I don't know why anyone would choose to be in a relationship or get married to them. I think divorce is inevitable in many of these cases. Lastly, I want to tell you about Yasmin. Now, Yasmin came from another country without naming it, and she was actually stuck in the same position in her career in a foreign office for about 14 years. So when she joined, she actually had a lot more technical experience than a lot of the other female management. But the thing is, she was a DEI hire, right? She was a woman and a minority. And if you're not familiar with that, typically they have a double quota. If you're a woman and a minority, whatever minority that would be, it's like you're ticking 2 boxes for the hiring quota for equality. So she was not good at English. Even though she had the technical skills, she lacked English speaking skills. It's kind of limited. So she'd make multiple mistakes in the instructions to me. She'll be making two grammar mistakes in a sentence, so it'd be a double negative, so you're not sure what she's trying to say sometimes. And I would save a lot of these emails and instant messages of screenshots she would give me that didn't make sense. Rather than saying that I should do a task or explaining how to do a task, she would just use random English words that she didn't know, like say, oh, we need to cook this task well. And it was just like, she should know if she's been in finance for 14 years, even in a foreign country. She's working here on the trading floor of $1 billion investment bank. She should know, cooking a task isn't a phrase to use. And then other things that should give me instructions bit by bit. I'll go to that desk and ask the trader this question. And then 2 minutes later, she'll say, oh, go and ask him this question, which is just a bad way of managing things. You don't want to constantly be interrupting traders with one question every 2 minutes. Often we'd have meetings. And again, like Vanessa, she would waste the start of the meeting talking about completely unrelated things, having a chat about podcasts she listened to and things like that with other female co-workers. So it'd be 10 minutes into a call, trying to deal with a very time-sensitive trading issue, and you'd have to listen to this chit chat. We don't have time to discuss this. We have to talk about the trade to help resolve this issue that's costing the company money. It's completely ridiculous. So I decided to leave. I think they could tell I was fed up too. And I did mention, like, I have this revolving door of female management and there's a reoccurring issue here. And she tried to play it nice, Vanessa, that, oh, well, things have changed now. Yasmin's much better. But it's like, there's still reoccurring issues. If she can't speak English clearly, why have you hired her? And the reason is they wanted to keep someone who'd been at the company for a long time, who'd put up with the drama and the nonsense because she'd been at the company for 14 years in another country. But also they wanted to hire more women in management. That's the only reason you'd put these people in positions of power. If you had a man who was creating this much drama, skipping work, being sick, making mistakes, not giving clear guidance, they would just say, oh, you have to go, you're not good at the job. But they give all these women these 2 to 3 years to mess everything up and then leave, and then no one holds them accountable. And the men who are more senior than me, at the level of some of these people I mentioned, or more senior than them, they'll just turn a blind eye because that's their role, right? That's what they've been told. You need more women in these roles, so you've got to play along with their nonsense. So in conclusion, Jesse Lee Peterson, who you might be familiar with, who's a black conservative in America, he says, this doesn't describe all women, but most. He always describes things to do with women that could be quite critical. And he says, oh, this is about not all women, but most women. And I think there is some reoccurring pattern here. And you'll see from the comments that other people have dealt with these type of drama, petty, jealousy, and things like that. And then always claiming that they have health issues, that they're burnt out, they want to take time off to be mothers, which makes sense. Also, the kids are suffering because they're not having their mother or some parental guidance, particularly when there is so much brainwashing aimed at kids, and women are so focused on petty drama in the office and climbing a corporate ladder that they don't need to really be focused on. And then you're at work, co-workers be gossiping, talking about the relationship drama, taking time away from the desk to go and talk about relationship drama, which is kind of a thing I noticed several times, where we had my co-worker Megan, who I mentioned, who spoke French, and we had a French female co-worker in an adjacent team that often go to a private meeting room to discuss relationship drama that one of them was dealing with. And it's a kind of ridiculous thing, right? I think, yes, men can also be bad at work and waste a lot of time and be kind of bullies or have unnecessary aggressive behavior, but I think it's just one of those things where my experience is that this has been a reoccurring theme. And you see all the memes and the jokes online about the girl boss. You can't just say it's just my experience. It's just a reoccurring theme. And I think what's going on here, I think it's that mega corporations, they want weak, docile, easy to control, effeminate, domesticated men. They don't want hardworking, productive family men. They don't want no BS men who just focus on the work. And sure, sooner or later, men are losing their patience. You see men dropping out of society. They don't want to put up with this kind of happy wife, happy life nonsense, or happy female co-worker, happy life nonsense. This never-ending drama nonsense that distracts from actually getting the work done and being productive and being profitable, right? So this system is filtering out many men from those management roles, right? And this is why I help men deal with this nonsense throughout my coaching, which covers many topics, but this is one of those, is how to deal with these personality types, how to make as much money as possible and then leave and plan your future. I think it was very difficult for many people to build skills in that type of environment. When you're dealing with this type of broken team dynamic, it turns into all this social drama instead of work focused type of issues. It's not like, oh, we're dealing with an issue where we're not making enough money as a company and there's going to be layoffs. It's more like people drama continuously. So I want you to share your girl boss experiences and dramas in the comments. Of course, you keep it clean and professional and tolerant for YouTube's terms of service. I thought that was just helpful for some of you to hear about some of my experiences. There is a link in the description for career coaching so I can help you directly. 2 recommended videos on the screen right now, and I'll see you next time.